I want to talk about the oral argument today at the United States Supreme Court, attended by Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell and Lisa Cook, about the independence of the Federal Reserve that just concluded. I'll give you my thoughts and handicapping that. If you want to watch it for yourself, the 2 hours, it's up on Legal AF YouTube. We did a live stream. I did a pregame show with Adam Klasfeld of All Rise News. Look, Adam Klasfeld has actually joined. Adam, do you want to talk about your view of what just happened with the Supremes? If you do, put it in comments. I've been to Tucson, Tracy. Is it sunny? It's cold, though. You said it's sunny. I think it's cold there, but I do appreciate the weather update. Suzanne from San Diego, I'm here. I appreciate you always being here. And Darla from Wisconsin. And Brenda, thank you for your thanks. Josh says Solicitor General's a tough listen. I said during the pregame show he was unlistenable. Let's see if Adam will join. And as we get our audience together here, it's 70 degrees in Tucson. Sorry, Terry, I didn't realize that. I don't know. I guess it's always sunny in Tucson. Alicia, thank you for your compliments. All right, let me see if I can try to bring in Adam, see if he'll join me. Be a good symmetry since we did the pregame show. We'll start with the Supreme Court. See if I can get him. And if he's in a place where he'll join, I'm sure he'll join. As we get our morning group. It's cold in Spain, Jill Fuentes. Yeah, I love Spain. Look, we might be getting Adam.
Hey, how's it going?
And that's what happens when I get to watch my chat. I see old friends, and I said there's a certain symmetry since you and I kicked off this morning with the pregame show about the oral argument. Now that it's concluded, you and I think we were both right, by the way. It was both narrow and broad.
Right.
Let me catch everybody up, and then we'll get you in for your commentary about it. And I think what people like about what we do here, your approach, my approach, Legal AF's approach, is that we may not always agree on everything. We come from different perspectives, you catch things I don't catch, I catch things you don't catch. I've got my life experience and professional experience, you've got yours. But together we are giving honest appraisal and honest commentary to our audience. I think that's it, right? It's the honest appraisal part. Not always right. As I joke, I'm almost never wrong, but I am wrong. I mean, things don't go exactly the way I would have thought. But then I've explained it in a way that at least it makes sense. And I think you certainly are skilled at that as well. So as we got our group here, all right, so oral argument today. On paper, the issue is narrow. Should the Supreme Court enter a stay to keep Lisa Cook, Board of Governor, in her chair while other things happen at the trial court level or not? The question that you and I had is, were they going to expand that and get to, did Donald Trump fire her for cause? What was the cause? Is mortgage fraud a real cause? Was this really mortgage fraud? It happened before she was on the board, even if it happened. So how could that be good, just cause? How are they going to define, we questioned, the Supreme Court 9, how are they going to define cause and due process? And were we going to see a lot of scrunched noses from at least 5 that were like, no, you can't just fire Lisa Cook by social media posts because you want to take control of the Federal Reserve. And just as you and I said, not only was Lisa Cook there, understandably, it's her case, Jay Powell, Federal Reserve Chairman, Dark J, as I like to call him. I like Dark Powell, like Dark Biden, laser. You just got, just sat down quietly in the room, sort of like when they, I'll use my Godfather references, like in Godfather 2, when they brought Frankie Pantangeli's brother in from Sicily or Calabrese to sit in the room to intimidate people. And I'll just give my, 10-cent view. There are 5 or more votes to keep Lisa Cook in her chair and send the proceeding back down to Judge Gia Cobb for further record development with some guidance about due process. I think they bought the due process argument, and to get to the bottom of mortgage fraud and come back maybe one day to the United States Supreme Court, but that Lisa Cook will prevail. And for me, the canary in the coal mine for Donald Trump was Kavanaugh. When you hear Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett, who's often in the majority, when you hear Kavanaugh say, this would we the ability for the president, who he's like in favor of the president every time, unitary presidential model, for him to say it would weaken the stature of the Federal Reserve to allow this kind of firing. I'm like, are we done yet? Can we go right to the opinion writing?
Right.
What did you think?
I think that the Supreme Court is going to rule that Trump is not the unquestionable king of the Federal Reserve. There are going to be guardrails. There's that he is going to lose. I don't think it's going to be close. There was the excoriating exchange with Kavanaugh that you noted. I think Amy Coney Barrett also asked, and I think this is a direct quote, "Why are you afraid of a hearing?" You had an exchange where Samuel Alito, of all people, asked whether the mortgage application, the one that supposedly shows this fraud, was in the record. And
Right.
you had John Sauer replying, "I believe the screenshots of the tweet of the Truth Social
Wait,
post."
stop right there. Stop right there. The Solicitor General of the United States, in response to a right wing softball question, but obviously we knew the answer, about what was the record evidence to demonstrate the for cause fraud to fire a board of governor on the Federal Reserve. And he mentioned, because that's all there is, a screenshot of a tweet from Bill Pulte as the record evidence.
Right. It was incredible, and I had to post that as soon as I heard that because that was actually his answer. That was John Sauer, former Trump lawyer who went to the mat for him on Trump v. United States, and turned Solicitor General. Says, "I believe there is a screenshot of the mortgage application on the text of the social media post." That was his
and, and,
answer to Alito.
and for some people who did not tune in or don't know what we're talking about, John Sauer sounds like your pet cat was accidentally ran over in your driveway. I mean, he has an unlistenable voice. It's all I hear. It's very hard. And then he thinks he's getting paid by the word.
Right.
He's the guy that puts, 50 pounds of potatoes into a 10-pound sack. I mean, he can't answer a question. Could you imagine being behind him in line at a deli for lunch? Could you imagine how he orders his food? I mean, seriously, he can't just say tuna melt on toast. Thanks. And he wears the shit out of them. And what I said during the immunity decision and during the Colorado, when he was just Citizen Trump's private criminal appellate lawyer, and I knew after the election that he was going to be of course, we all knew he was going to be the Solicitor General. I said, this act of his of just trying to filibuster the Supreme Court and just talk over them and just kind of, because he is obviously he's like Rain Man. He just like remembers everything, knows every case, and repeats everything. He must have a photographic or near photographic memory. But I thought over time, we can go back and find it in my vault. I said we get to see the rest of your
Sorry.
apartment.
Sorry about that.
Right. Anybody wondering the decor for the Classfelds? Here it
I
is.
had a little bit of a technical
Oh,
problem
that's all
there,
right. That's
so
all right. That's why people love what we do. But I said he's gonna. This act, this one trick pony thing, is going to wear on the justices. The more John Sauer, the worse it is, and I think we're starting to see that.
Absolutely. And they had Solicitor General versus Solicitor General. Who argued for Lisa Cook? It was Paul Clement, a conservative attorney who was a Solicitor General under George W. Bush. And he just laid it out there like one important fact, that there has been no president of the United States since Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act during his presidency through Biden, who ever tried to oust a Federal Reserve governor for any reason. And so Trump is claiming that this is cause, and now he's saying, "Oh, but we have a problem. There are some limits on this." There was a great exchange, I believe, with Kavanaugh, having him articulate the basis, the reason. Why do we have
Say it out loud.
the independence of the Federal Reserve? Say out loud why the Federal Reserve Act was written for cause. What's the importance of it? And getting him to put that on the record and saying, well, your legal standard that there's no hearing, no notice, the low bar to even say what cause is and no way to dispute it, doesn't that essentially obliterate it? And what more was there to say? And when they went up to, and this is why I think the die is cast that
Yeah.
Trump is going to lose on the main issue here. When you listen closely to the questioning of Paul Clement, it
Oh, yeah.
it's more about, well, how are we going to write this thing?
Well, on
Um,
that note, because I want to shout out to our audience. Somebody wrote here. Let me see if I can find it quickly about Paul Clement. Josh Shua said, "I thought Paul Clement's brief went very well. They were comfortable with him. Yeah, because he was a legitimate Solicitor General under Bush, and now Clement has made a career for himself in this his third swan song here. Even though he's right wing conservative, in representing when he thinks the Department of Justice or the presidency is out of control. He has stepped into that pathway and he's represented people about who are the targets of Trump's retribution or the Department of Justice. And he brings in that in there's nothing I agree with Paul Clement on in terms of the positions that he took when he was Solicitor General against gay marriage, against reproductive rights. I mean, there's really nothing that I would, I could have a cup of coffee with him, but there's nothing that I would agree with. But to his credit, as a patriot, ideologically separate from me, and he's honest in his commentary. You may not agree with it, but he is honest in his commentary in a way, of course, that John Sauer is not. So, what do you think? So let's handicap. People can write it down. What do you think they count to five? Yes. How many votes do you think? Is this 7-2? Is this 9-0?
I think it's more than 5-4 and more than 6-3. I think going to be lopsided, and I think the real, and I think that this could be one of these crazy rulings where you have people deciding under different bases and the real details of it. Will they decide? This was one interesting exchange with Clement where they were essentially asking him, does Lisa Cook win on the record of the fact that she has put forward her explanation, and her explanation is that this was a mistake, and if this is negligence and negligence isn't enough, does she win, and do we need a hearing? That was Roberts's position. So
You and
there's
I said in the opening, in the pregame, we said watch Roberts because
right,
he led in the summer, in the spring, when they wrote their decision to allow Donald Trump to lop off another head, to decapitate another head of another congressionally created agency, independent agency like the FTC, or in this case, the National Labor Relations Board. They said, but not the Fed. Get your
right,
mitts off the Fed. They didn't have to write that. And at the time, we all circled it and we said, oh, look at Roberts and the others putting a ring fence around Jay Powell. This is before Donald Trump went after Jay Powell criminally, apparently, and otherwise to try to destabilize him, just continuing to shake, hoping that something falls out of the tree. What's fallen out of the tree and coming down the coconut tree is Donald Trump's ridiculous arguments. And I agree with you. I'd be shocked if it's not 8-1.
right,
I might be shocked if it's not 9-0 when I go back and
right.
listen to the hearing. And so that would be an easy win for the American people. The question I have for you is, yes, every case stands on its own merits, but having given him a loss and clipped his wings on federal presidential power in this case, the tariff decision is not coming this week, and it's not coming in January. I mean, people can just relax. If I'd be shocked if it comes before March, April, May, and likely June, because they don't care about the accumulated tariffs. Like, oh my God, the number's getting so big, we better hurry up and rule. They don't care about that. These are not business people. If anybody's noticed on the on the bench, especially the Supreme Court, so they don't care about that. They'll make their ruling in their own time. But do you think it has any impact? Are they, like an umpire? Are they going to they're gonna like a makeup call and then go? Or do you think the die is cast on the tariffs decision too? You watch that hearing, and another loss for Donald Trump on a major, in this case, economic policy.
I think that the die is cast on tariffs too.
I
I
agree with you.
think that, yeah, and I think that it's the nature of the defeat that we have to look at, because how do they send this? If they find that Lisa Cook deserved due process, and this is the standard. What is that standard? Because you
Yep.
know that Trump and his
Try it again.
government and his lawyers are going to look at that standard and they will try to gin up and manufacture something to bring it up to that line.
Yeah, I'll tell
And
you what it isn't. It isn't cost overruns to renovate 200-year-old buildings, which is what they're going after Jay Powell for, or comments that he made to Congress about it. I mean, they're like, oh, there are, the whole did Jay Powell lie about the executive dining room or washroom or not? I mean, are you if you think Kavanaugh was fired up against Donald Trump trying to dismantle the independence of the Federal Reserve and capture it now, wait till they try to do it to Jay Powell,
right.
because you had all these amici briefs, all these amicus briefs by former Federal Reserve chairmen, former federal bankers of central bankers from around the world, all rallying to the independence of the Federal Reserve, not just for the American economy, but also for the world economy. And just so everybody kind of gets on the same page here, um, even the person that Donald Trump will likely pick to be the replacement for Jay Powell starting in May, while Jay Powell stays on the Board of Governors in a non-chairmanship position, Kevin Hastert, he has said you never want to have only bad things happen when the leader of the country has the controls of monetary and fiscal policy, including dictatorships. Only hyperinflation results. So that's his own guy, on that. And one answer to somebody in the chat, somebody said it'll probably be 7-2 because Alito and Thomas never rule against Donald Trump. That's not completely true. I mean, I get your point, and that's generally true. But like even in the Abrego Garcia case,
9-0.
9-0. I mean, as you and I joke, you can't get them to agree 9-0 on a Sweetgreens order for lunch.
Right.
I must be hungry. I'm making a lot of lunch references.
Well, it's that hour.
It's that hour. So,
But
yeah.
to that point, I mean, one again, the harsh questioning from Alito, specifically on the point of is the mortgage application in the record? That was Alito.
Right.
And you mentioned the amicus briefs. One of the amicus briefs that resonated with Amy Coney Barrett, she noted that the former Federal Reserve chairs saying that this could plunge the United States into recession if he is allowed to oust Lisa Cook. And Coney Barrett asked, essentially, how does that factor into the public interest that they're receiving amicus briefs saying that America can go into a recession if they allow Trump to oust Lisa Cook?
Yeah. I have one big question for you. When Amy Coney Barrett goes and picks up her kids at school, is she just Amy Barrett? Did she really use the whole thing there, or is that just because RBG was off and they decided to give her the middle name? I'm not really asking that question seriously. Here is while we have our audience, I don't think we're at maximum yet, but we're certainly getting to a peak here with 1,300 people. This is Adam Klasfeld for All Rise News. I'm Michael Popok. Take a minute and go up to this little chyron somewhere, and it'll tell you whether you are already free subscribed to either of our two channels. And if you're not, then hit the button for the one that you're not. That allows you to give comment on the side. Plus, when this video goes up in about an hour, it's all Substack world. I don't control it, but you'll get the full video because people are joining in progress, still joining in progress. And we've been talking for 20 minutes already about the Federal Reserve oral argument today concerning Lisa Cook. So it's a great way. And the other way to support what Adam does, which is to get into courtrooms and travel all over the country, and for us to keep the Legal AF community together and have the resources to grow and have the editors and people like Adam, is to consider becoming a paid member of both. And there's buttons for that as well. You have time to hang around for my next thing?
I believe so,
All right,
yeah.
stay on. Let's do, did you get a chance to see Engelmeyer's order?
I did,
All right,
yes.
let's talk through that. And as people know, I'm going to talk about Epstein, the Epstein files now, and an order that just came hot off the presses in the last few minutes by Judge Paul Engelmeyer in New York, which was, you could tell he was conflicted. You can tell he was moved by the affidavits and declarations of survivors of Epstein to encourage him to get the Department of Justice out of the business of producing documents because they forfeited their right to be trusted. They've been disappearing millions of documents and holding them and not producing them on a rolling basis for the last month. and to appoint a special master. So today was the day he ruled. He quoted to Lisa Phillips' declaration. Full disclosure, I represent Lisa Phillips. We filed that declaration on her behalf. He quoted it chapter and verse, but then almost tinged with a little bit of bittersweetness said, I don't have the jurisdiction or the authority on my limited remit of being the federal judge over a effectively closed criminal case involving Ghislaine Maxwell, which is already cooked, baked, and Supreme Court already rejected her appeal, to give you that relief that you're looking for. But there was a silver lining and the last page of the order, right?
Right, absolutely. He said that doesn't stand in the way of filing a separate lawsuit. He said it doesn't stand in the way of congressional action. There's a potential roadmap there, and I think that the yeoman's work that you and the survivors have been doing to give that request more momentum and gravitas and authority was very important. I have to say, I was a little surprised when the Congress members chose that forum. And I think your read on the ruling is 100% correct, Michael, because I read that ruling as saying this is a closed criminal case. These are very important issues, as the survivors are saying. And the judge appeared to be puzzled by the Congress members' choice of this particular forum. And he said that there are other avenues. He said there is the avenue of trying to enforce this through Congress. There's the avenue of trying to file a lawsuit. So this is a potential roadmap here, and I think that this is a chapter of this.
Yeah, I know why they did it because, and there is an argument that by running to the federal court, the Department of Justice had triggered the inherent authority of the court broader. I mean, if Engelmeyer had said, listen, I normally don't have the jurisdiction or the authority because this is a closed criminal case between two parties and neither party, Ghislaine Maxwell or nor the Department of Justice, are asking for this. However, having come to federal court a number of times in order to involve us in the production, I am going to use my inherent authority. He just narrowed it and said, I'm sorry, I'm only here about the protective orders and the release of certain files. It's almost like I'd like to do more. So here's how he ended. Let me just read from the order. And a shout out to Lisa Phillips, who was on with me last night for a live interview on The Intersection. And this is from Lisa Phillips's own declaration that we prepared and filed on her behalf. On page 3, it says, the court has received letters and emails from victims of Epstein supporting the representative's request for appointment of a neutral to oversee DOJ's compliance. They express concern that the Department of Justice will not comply with the act. They note that the DOJ's track record has been marked by, and this was what we included, language from Judge Engelmeyer's own order from a month ago, paying lip service to the victims and failing to treat us with the solicitude we deserve. That's from Lisa Phillips' own declaration. We have it up on Substack for everybody to read about her being re-traumatized by the way that the Department of Justice is just continuing to mistreat them. I asked her point blank in the interview, has anybody in the Department of Justice or the president, he has a lot of people in the Oval Office. He's always there with trophies and ribbons and all sorts of binders and all sorts of meetings. Has he ever invited you or any of the survivors to come meet with him? No, of course, no. But here's the silver lining. Judge Engelmeyer says at the end of his order on page 7, this decision is without prejudice to the representative's right to initiate a separate lawsuit. Ta-da! So I see a lawsuit in the future. Maybe Kana and Massey, I like to call them Mana or Cassie. They're so linked together now with all things
Right.
Epstein. And or survivors file because there's been a violation of the Epstein Act, and run that into federal court. May not be Engelmeyer because it'll be randomly approach, and let the Department of Justice argue about standing, and they don't have the ability, and it's a toothless act. It doesn't have any mechanism to enforce. Yeah, let's fight that out in federal court, because even an act that doesn't have express language to give somebody a private right of action, you can interpret when it's missing that there should be one, and courts will often give people the ticket to the courthouse. So stand by, everybody. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if my client's going to do it or some other survivor. We're going to be back in court on this issue.
Mm. Well, I will cover that. I am if depending on where that lands. Here's a question because I know that the survivors went to two judges,
Yeah.
one of whom has ruled. There's Engelmeyer, who has just issued
Sure.
his ruling, but there's also
Urban.
Judge Berman, and Berman, as far as I can tell, has been silent on whether he has inherent authority. And I saw the Congress members' legal brief on that, and it's a really interesting point that they make. That
Yeah.
here's the government trying to essentially set up federal judges as the fall guys for
I agree.
why they're late. So are
That's
we
my argument.
sure? Are
Oh,
are we sure that this is over, or
no,
might?
you're right. That's a very good point that you make. Now, his case, no pun intended, is even more dead than enclosed. Sorry, everybody. Than Ghislaine Maxwell's because he presides over Jeffrey Epstein's case.
Correct.
But he, the argument that they're raising is the one that I raised, which is when you're like sort of like when you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. If you're going to go run to federal court and try to use them as pawns to blame federal judges for withholding the Epstein files, when all along you've been sitting on the mountain of Epstein files, and to be clear to our audience, the, the Epstein files have always resided in the mountain of Epstein file in one place, the executive branch. They've never needed congressional approval to release the Epstein files. They've never need court approval to release the mountain of Epstein files. That was all a ruse to try to distract and have the Trump administration hopefully delay. Oh, we'd love to release them, but Congress. Oh, we'd love to release them, but federal judges. But when you run in and start screwing around with federal judges and make them your pawns for the American people, I think a judge could say differently than Engelmeyer, and what he just said is not binding on Judge Berman or Judge King or any of the other judges. He can say, you know what? You waived any argument, Department of Justice, that I don't have the inherent authority. You have given me my inherent authority by coming here and demanding certain things from me. And so I don't like the way the process is going. So I'm going to appoint a special master and we'll get to the bottom of it. And Berman could. He's not a wild card and he's not bound by his, just to answer the question, different district judges handling the same matter or similar matter. They rule separately until there's an appellate court higher to them that resolves it. So you're right. I think that's a very good point. We'll keep an eye open for Judge Berman. My gut is he'll follow Engelmeyer, but maybe he won't.
Right. And the other difference is, as you noted, it's not US v. Maxwell, it's US v. Epstein. It might be material, you might look at it as
Yeah,
materially different
that's
to the mandate of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. So we'll wait and see. And we'll wait and see if that gets resolved before another lawsuit is filed. One of the letters that went into Berman's court was from another Epstein survivor, Haley Robeson.
uh-huh.
And when I read her letter, there was something that she listed the type of files that have not been released. And I thought that the ones that she flagged were fascinating because it talks about what are of most interest to her and
Yeah.
some of the survivors that she speaks to, like FBI 302s, the interviews, what they told the FBI, and what came of those FBI interviews. So there's a whole list of them, but and so I think when the survivors band together, and the right mechanism is found, there could be real movement on this.
Yeah, and Lisa Phillips, who was on with, as I said, was on with me last night on the intersection. She said, and it's not a threat. I mean, when you're a survivor, it's
Right.
not threats. Or as I said on a Substack essay, when survivors lead, justice has to follow. She said, if they keep screwing with us, she's more dignified than I just put it. If they keep screwing and tormenting and trolling the survivors who have all now sort of linked together, all 1,500 of them, and they talk regularly and they text regularly. And if they don't see these files coming out, they're going to start holding regular press conferences and maybe testimony to Congress about the people that sexually abused them. They're going to make the client list come out because they're going to testify. They're waiting to see they're waiting to see, but this is like it's a mutual assured destruction if the government doesn't release it. Between the estate of Epstein still cranking out stuff they're always finding new hard drives and new email boxes, and the victims. And now this thing's not done. Now investigative reporting is based on whatever's been released and what's been released through the Epstein estate is following the money. See, in my world, as a 35-year lawyer, we always follow the money and the corruption. Now it's ending up at major universities that may have been money laundering, wittingly or unwittingly, for Jeffrey Epstein to get cash to his victims and offer them plum seats at these major universities. Goldman Sachs, general counsel, apparently was the executor for the Epstein will and has her emails all over. Does she survive? I mean, when you see all, and the way I interpret all these things is layers of protection as we watch that we need to burn through, that as we watch the rich and powerful and the Trump administration cover up for a international child sex trafficking ring. I mean, have you ever seen a presidency work overtime or at all to cover up a child sex trafficking ring? This is the hill that Donald Trump is willing to die on?
And one of the tip of the spear senators who's really looking into the financial piece of the puzzle is Ron Wyden. He's been looking into the billionaires who were giving Epstein, to call them above market rates, undersells it. They were hundreds of millions of dollars for supposed accounting and legal advising, even though Jeffrey Epstein wasn't a lawyer, he was an accountant. And he's looking into, hey, Leon Black, why were you paying Jeffrey Epstein this much? He has put in subpoenas to the IRS, to FinCEN, the financial
Right.
investigators of the IRS, to look into that. Very close to where I am right now in federal court in the Southern District of New York. There are 2 more lawsuits against major banks after major settlements against 2 major banks, JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank. Now it's Bank of America
Yeah.
and the Bank of New York Mellon. So there are still processes that are playing out outside of the scope of the Epstein Files Transparency Act. But to your point about what the survivors are going to do, it was their advocacy that we're talking about the enforcement of the
Absolutely.
Epstein Files in Transparency Act. This was not a sure thing. This was something that very few people thought would pass until they held press conferences outside of Capitol Hill. And so that kind of pressure, for folks to look at a setback that could be on reasons that are entirely procedural. This isn't going anywhere. There's going to be more advocacy. There's going to be more pressure on it. And there has been substantial progress already. Well, before, yes, so much more needs to be released. But to just give one example, Maria Farmer, for decades, could not find the police report that she filed against Jeffrey Epstein. And it now became a matter of public record that she reported child pornography because she had taken photos of her minor sisters because she's an artist.
Yeah.
And when the New York Times had found out that the FBI report was one of the released Epstein files, she, according to the New York Times, broke down into tears and said that now they can't call me crazy anymore. It's proof that she filed it.
Absolutely. And I do want to acknowledge, I want to acknowledge the chat. I see some great questions about following the money and appreciating what you and I are doing. Take a moment, hit that subscribe button. All Rise News with Adam Klasfeld, Michael Popok here on Legal AF. That's the way to support what we do. Keep independent journalism independent and commentary coming to you with the level, not just the commentary, but the volume, the velocity at which we both operate and are on our respective platforms and together. If you want to give a thumbs up for that, become a member and consider becoming a paid member as well. Jill, I did see your invite from Mallorca up on the screen. Forget the subscriptions. I'm going to Mallorca.
It's a beautiful place.
I don't want to abuse your time, but give me 2 minutes. Let me wrap up this first breaking briefing. I do another one tonight at 7:45 with Lindsay Halligan. We'll try to do it in less than 2 minutes so I don't abuse people's time. I sort of promised them I'd keep these things to about 30 minutes. So you and I did all the reporting yesterday about these back-to-back orders. I disagreed with the chief judge's order. I don't think the vacancy was created in the Eastern District of Virginia yesterday by the expiration of 120 days. I think it was created by, I'm a Judge Curry fan, and I think Judge Curry's order on November 24th kicked Lindsay Halligan out of that seat in the Eastern District, creating a vacancy. And then I was sitting around every month, every week going, when's the Eastern District of Virginia judges going to get together and like appoint a new and challenge and confront the Trump administration? Days were going on, weeks were going on. And then Novak, Judge Novak, a Trump appointee, he can't take it anymore. So he's like, are you? I mean, after he got attacked, after he had the temerity to call out Lindsay Halligan in an order to show cause order to say, explain to me in a writing that you sign with your name. And I'm like, oh, I wonder what title she's going to use. Why you're not, why based on these facts, you're not masquerading and impersonating a U.S. attorney. Why you're continuing to do that despite being fired and found illegal by Judge Curry, and why I shouldn't report you to the bar and other regulatory bodies for violating a whole host of ethical rules, for not complying with orders, for misrepresenting, for misleading, and all of that. Tell me why and sign it. So we get it, right? And I'm like, she's not going to put Lindsay out. I said to her, I tried to talk to her in a hot take. I said, Lindsay, meet me on camera one. Just put your name. Don't put a title under it. You know, when the entire issue is about whether you're impersonating a U.S. attorney, don't sign it U.S. attorney.
Right.
She signs it U.S. attorney, along with Pam Bondi and Todd Blanche. And they get under the judge's skin, understandably, who's all about the rule of law and the abuse of the rule of law. All right. So you do Novak, and then we'll say what happened late last night as Donald Trump's short-circuited Air Force One doesn't quite make it to Davos because he's a coward. He's old Yellowstone, and he cowardly leaves, and then Lindsay Halligan's got to resign in disgrace. But talk about Novak and the leading to the resignation.
Trump appointee Judge David Novak comes out furious at Blanche, Bondi, and Halligan for writing a disrespectful brief full of vitriol about that was more fitting for a cable news talk show than the Department of Justice, and strikes U.S. Attorney from Lindsay Halligan's signature and warns her and any other attorney, including Bondi and Blanche, who would co-sign her legal brief, pretending that she's a U.S. attorney, masquerading, in the judge's words, as a U.S. attorney, that they will face discipline. And hours before that, the chief judge of the district puts out a job listing to replace Lindsay Halligan, and by evening, lo and behold, we're seeing headlines that Lindsay Halligan is leaving her position. No, she is forced out of her
She
what was
resigned
never
in disgrace.
she was forced out of what was never her position. That is the accurate headline. That is not an opinionated headline. It is an accurate headline because she was found to have been there from the beginning, unlawfully and unconstitutionally.
You just triggered me. I'm gonna do my Carolyn Levitt imitation. That just shows you that you are a left-wing activist. You are not an impartial reporter. You have no place on this Substack Live, Adam Classified. And you should immediately leave.
Right. Well, it goes to show how afraid people are to call out material reality, because the material reality of the situation is that A, Lindsay Halligan was never a U.S. attorney. B, she was forced out. C, the DOJ blinked. These are all facts. There is not an alternate universe where she left voluntarily, that, this was 3 different judges, one finding that she was unconstitutionally in the office, another threatening disciplinary action, and a third trying to actively replace her. And she says, okay, I am leaving now. And you report am leaving, that misleads your audience.
But some people are questioning, isn't this last night's news? No, it's not at the bottom of the birdcage yet. It just happened yesterday. And I'm sure Adam and I will come up with a value add about something that we observed. That's why we're here. It's not often like breaking the news. It's also talking about the ramifications of it and the next steps. And she's joined a growing list of resigned in disgrace list of political hacks serving as U.S. attorneys. You've got, and soon to be joined by others. You've got the Delaware U.S. attorney. You got Alina Habba. You got the one in Nevada, the one in California. John Sarkozy's going to see the writing on the wall soon.
Oh, yeah.
He's going to have to resign. And why we focus on it is that crowds and courage and public participation in our democracy and focus here with us on independent journalism has an impact. It works because
Right.
Trump folds a lot. He folds a lot in his appellate cases against against the Democracy Forward, the ACLUs, the attorneys general. They fold a lot, and
Right.
they don't pursue appeals. I'll give you an example. Folding a lot in the Halligan case, Judge Novak said, besides one of my favorite quotes, which is effectively the masquerading of by you as an attorney general must come to an end. He just didn't think
Yes.
it was going to come to an end like that night. But
Right.
my favorite analysis is when, I'll see if I can grab it quick, is when Novak says in his order, you had, when you got fired by Judge Curry in November, you had a series of things you could have done to keep your title, and you did none of them, just to show you how incompetent they are. Although I'm not sure it's incompetence. I want to get your opinion. He says, you could have ran to Judge Curry and asked for a stay. You didn't do that. You could have ran to the Fourth Circuit, where you ran for your appeal, and asked them for a stay. You didn't do that. You could have asked the judges of the Eastern District to appoint you in the interim. You didn't ask for that. You could have asked the chief judge to let you use the title until your appeal is over. Nope. You could have asked each individual judge to recognize you as the U.S. attorney. You didn't do any of that. Instead, you just didn't like the order, so you ignored it. And I can't allow you to do that, because if I allow you to do that, I have to allow every litigant and criminal defendant in my courtroom to do that. And then we would just have a complete collapse of our justice system. But I'm not sure. I don't think they just were incompetent. I think this was a decision by Todd Blanche, maybe Pam Bondi, certainly not Lindsay Halligan, to treat Curry's order as something they could ignore, that there was enough ambiguity in it, although you and I see no ambiguity in the creation of the vacancy or the application throughout the district, that they were just going to, because if they moved to stay it, it would be a recognition that they thought it would undermine their argument that they can ignore it. See what I'm trying to say?
Entirely.
Right.
And I think this is the second day lead here, that this was supposed to be a blueprint, that when a federal judge, when a district court judge says you are illegally appointed, you're unconstitutionally appointed, how much longer can he keep the loyalist in there? And this ended with a catastrophic failure, with the leadership of the Justice Department being threatened with disciplinary proceedings, with the charading pretend U.S. attorney facing the possibility of disciplinary proceedings. And they blinked. They tried to play a game of chicken with the federal judiciary, with a Trump appointed judge. And when called out in excoriating fashion, they blinked. And that's going to have ramifications nationally.
One observation and one question for us to end on here about this. Observation is page 2 of Judge Novak's order, which was certainly, if not the final nail, the second to last nail in the coffin here. I think it was the final nail. He said, he commenting on the opposition paper by the Department of Justice signed by Lindsay Halligan. He said the vitriol that was in that filing is beneath the Department of Justice, and he's never seen it before, and it belongs on a cable news channel, not in a courtroom being led by the Department of Justice, right?
Right.
And here's the question for you. You read Judge Lux, Chief Judge of the Eastern District's, her one-pager in which she advertised for a help wanted for a vacancy, and she never, why didn't she reference Judge Curry's November 24th decision creating the vacancy? Why did she take an alternative view that that the government was allowed to appoint a second interim, start a second 120-day clock, but that 120-day clock had also expired, and now there was a vacancy? Why do you think, as I know she's a new chief judge, but why do you think she didn't even drop a footnote that says Judge Curry ruled that there's a vacancy on November 24th, which of course is all over the Novak decision? Why do you think she did that?
I think that she was pointing out that even had Lindsay Halligan been appointed legitimately, which she wasn't, and even if it wasn't unconstitutional, which it was, and even if it wasn't illegal, which it was, then we'd still need to find a replacement now.
Yeah,
And I imagine, and I can't say this for certain, but I imagine I don't know if there's literally a cafeteria in the Eastern District of Virginia. I've
there is.
been in okay, I've been in the court, never in the cafeteria.
It's the same
But
stale
judges talk.
donuts and coffee in every federal court cafeteria.
Right. But federal judges talk, and I imagine that it may not have been a coincidence that these two opinions were landing on the same day. And I
I
think there was an avoidance of doubt.
I agree with you. I think what she did is she didn't want the confrontation with the Trump administration, and the easiest way to thread the needle was to adopt their version of the procedure, but say even under your version of the procedure, DOJ, time up. Time is up. So I don't even have to go back to November because, frankly, she can't roll back the clock. She should have done this posting November 25th, right before Thanksgiving, right? Having missed that window for her now to say, you know what, under even their own theory, she's out of gas. So I think you're right. It was a way, and yes, and she probably, I would be shocked if she didn't know that Novak, even if they didn't talk collaboratively because they're not supposed to about the order,
Right.
a law clerk calls another law clerk or over pizza and says, well, we know that there's an order coming. When is that coming? And if just the knowing the timing, they'd be like, well, Judge Novak's still working on it, but it's going to be later today. Oh, let me get the help wanted out. You're right. There is a little bit of that. They're not in silos. They're human beings, and
Right.
they do walk and grab coffee together, even though which should give people a lot of confidence, at least at the district court level. I'm glad you were able to join, my friend. We rounded out our day here. You're on the Legal AF Substack live. I do two a day, as close to noon as I can do, and one in the evening. This is Adam Klasfeld with All Rise News. Take a moment before we end the video to hit the subscribe button. That's free. You get to comment at the next time we get together. And we're building I'd say 60 to 70% of my chat is regulars. I mean, that show up and they talk to each other and talk to me, and it's really great. And then if you want to become a paid member, it runs, I don't know, $6 or $7 a month, like the price of a fancy Starbucks. And between Adam and me, we will overwhelm you with return on your investment, quality content, videos and interviews and essays and analysis and lives and all sorts of things that you can't find anywhere else out there on Substack. So support each other, support us. We appreciate you. And in about an hour-ish, up to Substack, not me, this video will go up for those that have been joining in progress. And you'll be able to, if you're a member, you'll be able to get a copy of the video and watch it from the beginning. Last words? Any last words, Adam?
I think you said it all. I enjoyed doing these so much, Michael.
Me
Looking forward to the next chat.
Absolutely. And I'll see you later in the week. Thanks all. And thanks to our audience. Shout out to the Midas Mighty and the Legal AFers.